welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the first installment of our Take 20 Jira Power Series, how to build and manage workflows in Jira. Your time is very valuable, so we have created this series of quick 20-minute webinars to offer some tips, tricks, insights to help you boost your Jira, or for some of you to learn more about Jira. A few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out the webinar and the slides to all the participants later this week. We welcome your questions, so please type them into the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I'd like to present to you Yugang Patnagar. He's our business solutions consultant here at Corporate Renaissance Group, and he specializes in the Atlassian suite. So Yugang, take it from here.
Hello, everyone. Very good morning. As a brief introduction of myself, I'm working with Corporate Renaissance Group in the Atlassian practice. I am certified in Agile development with Jira software and Atlassian certified in Jira project administration. So I will take you today to cover the following agenda topics: what makes a workflow in Jira, how to engage the stakeholders to make a workflow awesome, how to leverage the advanced workflow configurations, and how to share the workflows with very similar project needs. And we would then move on to the demo and finally open to the questions. So just in simple terms, if you try to understand what a workflow in Jira is, it's a combination of statuses and transitions. So you can imagine status as any state in a workflow, and transition as a one-way bridge to connect two statuses. A workflow basically is a life cycle and is a reflection of your processes in the organization. Once you know the basics of workflow, you probably know what a workflow is. I would now move on to the problem which we hear from many of the administrators with which we have worked with in the past and in the present. They always complain that the Jira workflow is not being used by the stakeholders the way they should be. And though they have built it with the best of their knowledge of Jira, it's still not usable to many of the stakeholders. And the solution we always come up with at the end is that they should have built the change as per the need of the stakeholders. And why we say that all the time is because we have figured out that there are so many roles and so many working teams to make a successful product, is that there are always different degrees of knowledge about the platform of Jira and about the processes and the granular needs, that not everybody is on the same page at the same time. For example, Jira admin, he may be expert in knowing the Jira platform in and out, but he may not be very well aware of the processes and the granular needs around those processes to make a successful life cycle of the product. Project admin, he may not be very well aware of the Jira platform, but he may know the processes in and out. So there are some gaps across different roles in the life cycle. So that is something which we need to fill up and make those red crosses as greens to make a successful and usable workflow. That's why we propose the cycle of change. We should, as an admin or as a volunteer or an advocate for a change, we should engage in an open dialogue with all the stakeholders, discuss the requirements, the processes, and the granular needs from the end stakeholder perspective, and build the right workflow at the very start. Sit together across the table, review it, and once everybody has agreed, then let the admin go and publish it. This way, we can be very certain that the product we would see in terms of the workflow would be most agreed upon and would be most usable to all the stakeholders. How can we do that? To make that discussion fruitful as a Jira admin or as a volunteer for change, we should prepare a questionnaire and keep it handy during those discussions. Know who does what and how in the team. Know the various transitions from team to team. What are the approvals and why they are needed? And if there are any dependencies, make a note of it at why. So just as an example, try to map the flow of the processes across different teams. Just as an example, we can see the BA team normally works on the requirements and they come up with issues and stories. The Scrum Master in that particular team reorders the stories and assign works to the developer. And the developers start coding once they have given a go-ahead by the Scrum Master. The QA tests the code and the functionalities around it and either pass or fail the test. And the deployment team at the end takes all those functionalities and deploys them into production. Once you have mapped out the process, try to figure out who does what and what are the dependencies. Just in this case, we have tried to figure out in the whole process here, who, like in this case, BA team does what. They work on the requirements, and the end state is that they come up with the issues and stories. And once the state has been identified, that now they need to be opened as in the open status and assigned to the Scrum Master. Scrum Master acts as a dependency for the developers because he gives the go-ahead after reordering the stories based on their priority and the need of the product. So this you can identify that here we have a dependency. And we, in a similar fashion, figure out what may be the various status required in the end workflow. We have also identified the restriction that we need only the QA team members to test the functionalities, and they have only the right to pass or fail the test and to move it to the production team. So once you have mapped out the statuses and the transitions and the restrictions and the dependencies, it would be very helpful to move forward with the workflow. Your end result may look like this. It's a simple workflow which we have designed through the workflow designer in Jira. Moving on to the workflow configuration. So as Jira provides advanced workflow configuration, so just we hear a lot of requirements from our clients, and the common one look like these, like that only the reporter of the issue can reopen the issue, or only the QA team members close the issue. So how can we leverage the configuration in workflow? You can do that through the use of conditions. So conditions in a workflow provide a control whether a transition should be executed by the user. I would show you in the demo how to configure a condition. Next common requirement we hear from our clients are like our users should, with only certain permissions, should be able to create an issue. Just as an example, administer projects. It basically helps to control in a manner that only specified people with certain permission levels have the right to create an issue. We can use validators in workflow. Basically, validators check that any input made to the transition is valid before the transition is performed. Again, we will cover it in our demo. The next requirements we hear all the time, the aspects of automation. For example, if an issue is reopened, it should automatically assign to a certain person or with certain priority. Or if issue is assigned after in progress, it should automatically go to the QA. We can use post functions in workflow. So post functions carry out additional processes after transition has been executed. Once you have done so much investment in your workflow and you have reinvented the wheel in terms of the project requirements, you don't want to do it for every other team now and then. That's where we have the shared workflows. As a Jira administrator, you can associate different issue types. For example, bug, stories, tasks, subtasks, and assign different workflows to each of these issue types using the workflow schemes. And then you can share those workflow scheme across various projects in your organization. Or you can just simply copy the workflows and start making minor modifications if required. So let's move on and see how can we do these advanced configuration changes and where in Jira instance. So as a Jira administrator, you can request your Jira administrator to go to the settings, issues. It would ask to reconfirm your credentials. Click on workflows. Edit the workflow in which you want to make the change. Go to the workflow designer. And you would see the statuses and the transitions. For example, you want to add a condition. From reopen to close, you can click conditions, add a condition, and it will give you tons of options of assigning a condition for this particular transition. Once you are done with the changes, you can publish the changes and you will see the impact. In a similar manner, you can either discard or publish the changes from here. It would ask to make a copy of it. Going back, if you want to add a condition validator, again, you need to edit the workflow. Click on validator, and you can add validators. For example, and assign the permission that user with certain permission level should be only able to execute this transition. And you can either discard the changes or you can publish those changes. If I want to make additional changes, I can just select the transition again, click on post function, and it will have a generic events added to those post functions. You can add more post functions, which can help you automating the process. You can update the issue field, for example, and you can update the assignee, the description, the environment, and whenever this transition hits that particular logic point, the assigned parameters to the function would be executed. So it would help you cutting down on the repetitive tasks during the workflow.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, now we're just going to go ahead and cover the questions that we have here. Okay, so the first question that came in is, what is the difference between validators and conditions?
It's a good question. So there's a very slight difference between validator and a condition. A condition is where before the execution is performed, it would test that the condition has been met. So if there is a condition assigned to a transition, the user will not see the transition link in the issue. But in the case of a validator, before the end state is reached, the user will be shown a message if he has met that validation, like if he has got the assigned permissions or not. So condition is a prerequisite to meet a particular state, and validator checks for the end state to be reached.
All right, and we have here, are there any add-ons to enhance the workflows?
So what I showed you was something which was built in Jira, but there are a lot of add-ons which enhance both the capabilities of automation and post functions and conditions and validators. And also you can download more advanced workflows through Atlassian Marketplace. So yes, they are available.
I think these are all the questions that have come in. So I just want to thank everyone for joining today. Hopefully you gained some insight on how to build and manage Jira workflows. A quick survey will pop up after the session, and it'd be great if you could answer so that we can keep improving these sessions. And if you have any questions or would like to learn more about Sierra Group services or the Atlassian suite, we invite you to contact us. And be sure to register for our upcoming sessions at sierragroup.com/Jira20. Thank you so much, guys.